All right, this is Module 4, Lesson 1. We're going to start talking about percents. So today's going to be an overview or an introduction to percents. All right, so first thing it says is to match the percents with the correct sentence clue. So let's read through each sentence clue and match it up. It says, I am half of a half. So half would be 50%. Half of that would be 25%. So we're going to match up 25% to half of a half. I am less than 1 over 100. Now, percents are always over 100, so this is less than 1%. So the only thing that's less than 1% is half of a percent. All right, I am the chance of birthing a boy and a girl. That would be 50%. Two options, 50%. I am less than half, so less than 50%, but more than 1/4. 1/4 is 25%. So less than 50, more than 25 would be 30. I am equal to 1. When you have a percentage equal to 1, that's 100%. I am more than 1. That means I'm more than 100%, which would be 300%. I am a tenth of a tenth. Well, a tenth is 10%, so a tenth of 10% is 1%. I am less than a fourth, so less than 25%, but more than 100th, which is 1%. So the only thing left is a tenth. All right, so let's talk about what fractions actually represent. So 30 out of 100. Now, this is a 100 block, meaning there are 100 pieces here. So 30 out of 100 pieces is what we're going to shade. So I'm just going to shade 30 blocks. That would be 3 rows of 10. So this would represent 30 out of 100 blocks. Now, percentages are always out of 100. That's what a percent is. So this would represent 30 blocks or 30%. This one says 3 out of 100. So I'm going to shade in 3 out of 100 blocks. That's 3% because 3 boxes would be shaded. Now, this is a third out of 100. That doesn't mean a third of the whole grid. That means a third of one box. So a third of one box would look like this. What if it asks to represent 800%? What if we had to do that? How many boxes? I'm sorry, let's not do that. Let's do 800 100s. Okay, that would be how many blocks shaded? Well, each grid would be 100. So 800 would be 8 of these 100 grids. So that would be 100 grids times 8 would be shaded. That's the same thing as 800%. All right, so let's talk about going back and forth between fractions and decimals and how we change back and forth. So by definition of the word percent, per means divided by, cent means 100. So percent means divided by 100. That's what percent means. So 37.5% means 37.5 over 100. Now, we can never leave a decimal in a fraction. So we're going to move that over. And when we do that, we also have to move the bottom over one spot. So the fraction would be 375 over 1,000. Now, that fraction reduces. And I'm going to show you how to do that on the calculator. Okay. If you enter into the calculator 375 ABC 1,000 and hit enter, that will give you the reduced form of this fraction. So in this case, it's 3/8. I will tell you if you enter 37.5 ABC 100, it will give you an error because you cannot have a decimal in the fraction. All right, so let's continue on doing all the fractions. All right, so 100% would be 100 divided by 100, which is 1. 110% would be 110 divided by 100. This reduces. Now, if you do this in the calculator, you're going to end up with a mixed number, which is okay. So 1 and 1/10. 1% would be 1 divided by 100. That does not reduce. And this would be 1/2 divided by 100. Now, let's change this because we don't want a fraction in a fraction. So let's do 0.5 over 100. 1/2 is the same thing as 0.5. But now we can't have a decimal, so we're going to move it over. When we do that on the top, you're going to do it on the bottom, which would be 5 over 1,000. And you can enter that into the calculator. It will give you the reduced form, which is 1 over 200. So how are we getting all of these fractions? We are taking the percent and dividing by 100. Okay, so let's go to decimal format. Now, there's two ways we can do this. We can look at the percentage and make it into a decimal by moving the decimal 2 places to the left. So this would be 0.375. We could do it that way. Or we could divide the fraction in the calculator. So if I do that, I do 3 divided by 8, which is 0.375. It doesn't matter to me which way you do it. Whatever way is easiest to get that decimal. So I'm going to do it both ways again. I'm going to move the decimal place over twice, which is 1. Notice that is what your fraction already is. Next one, move it over twice would be 1.1. Well, 1 and 1/10, 1 divided by 10 is 0.1, so that would be 1.1. 1%, change it, would be 0.01. I could do 1 divided by 100 and get the same thing. This is 0.5%. So move it over twice and you get 0.005. Or you could divide it and get 0.005. So this column, you can move the decimal in the percent over 2 places to the left. So that's one way to do it. Or you can divide the fraction. 2 ways to do that. Okay, so let's go to example 2, and we're going to practice going back and forth from fractions to decimals. So we just were given percents, and we are going to fractions and decimals. So let's do that first. Remember, if we are given a percent, that just means that that number is over 100. We can reduce that fraction. 350 ABC 100 is 3 1/2. Decimals, you can either divide that or you can move it over twice, which is 3.5. Okay, so now we're given a decimal and we want to get the percent and fraction. So we haven't done that yet, but think about this. If you're getting the decimal by moving 2 spots to the left, how would you get the percent if you know the decimal? Well, we'll just do the opposite. Go 2 spaces to the right, which would be 2.5%. Now, if you go opposite, now you have the percent. So how do you get a fraction? 2.5% is 2.5 divided by 100. You can't do that, so we're going to move it over once, move this over once. 25 over 1,000. I can reduce that in the calculator, is 1 over 40. All right, so what if you have a fraction? We did talk about this already. If I want the decimal form of a fraction, I'm just going to simply divide. So that would be 0.125. Now that you know the decimal, we're going to go 2 spots over to the right, which would be 12.5%. All right, so we are using a calculator on this, and you are more than welcome to do that. So go ahead and try the homework. Make sure you show all of your work, even if it's just reducing the fractions. And we will go over that in class tomorrow. Good luck.